Wonderful performance. A round of applause again, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so I just heard that our guest speaker is in the building, and I guess we'll give him an opportunity to share with us. So at this time, we'll have the introduction of our guest speaker.
Thank you, Jordan. You know what? One of the things that make KiDz HuB work, guys, is the partnership we have. And I can tell you one thing. One of the people always ask why we do this, and one of the reasons why we do this is people always want to know: are we trying to make kids broadcasters? I came down from the United States after speaking with Uncle Jerry, and we partnered for a while, and he set up a meeting with our guest speaker, or tonight's guest speaker, for a half-an-hour meeting. Jerry, remember that? Half an hour. Very busy gentleman. I walked into his office and we started talking. What was supposed to be a half-an-hour meeting, 3.5 hours later, we were leaving his office. I was blown away by his absolute commitment to youth, to families. And ladies and gentlemen, it gives me pleasure to invite to speak to us this evening the most eligible person that can speak to the issue of kids and speak to the issue of youth in media, none other than Mr. Gary Allen, Managing Director of the RJR Communications Group. Could we just give him a bigger round of applause for that, please? Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for coming.
Master of Ceremonies, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm not going to be long, and I'm going to try and share with you more from my heart about how I feel about this project and about children in general, and to really look at the topic that was asked of me, which is looking at the importance of youth involvement in media today. Now, I have to confess that I tend to get nervous when I have to speak publicly, but especially so when I'm speaking to groups that include teachers and groups that include children, especially when the children are bright. Because sometimes you are waxing and going along and you don't realize a lot of the foolishness you're saying, but they do. And the honesty of children, one of them is going to let you know at some point. So if I seem a little nervous, that's what it is. But I hope I don't get as nervous as a Barbadian politician who I once heard. He got up in Parliament to speak in support of the anti-litter law, which also covered stray animals on the streets. And so he got up and said, "Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the motion because on my way here today, I came upon a flock of cows." And that's what happened. Some people chuckled. He said, "Yes, I came upon a flock of cows." And they laughed again. And his colleague minister beside him said, "Herd, herd." And he looked at her and said, "Herd? This is not something I heard. I saw them with my own two eyes." So I hope that when I'm through the things you say you heard, you also saw with your own two eyes, and the things that we talk about you shall find lovely. I want to start by congratulating the KiDz HuB Media Network for the fantastic work that you continue to do. I can't believe that the time has flown so much, and it is 5 years since we sat down and spoke. And I remember the conversation. I remember I had a speaking engagement in St. Catherine. Yes, and I didn't know it was your school, your old school that you were. I was going to speak at. So I thought that things come together for good. But I was absolutely impressed with the commitment that was shown to this project, and I have listened most intently to the kids as they are on our stations. And can I say that I thank you for choosing our station. Our station sounds all the better for having you on it. So we thank you very much. for partnering with us. I want to congratulate all those who support you, the sponsors who support you, the organizations that support you. And I want to congratulate the parents, the mentors, all those persons who make what you do so meaningful. But I also want to congratulate the children who participate, the ones who have realized that within them there is much to come out that is positive. If you listen today, and yes, if you listen to what we say in the media today, more than anywhere else, you wouldn't always believe that what comes out of our children is as positive as we know it can be in this organization. So I congratulate the organizers for allowing that positive influence to be exerted and for those positive skills to be developed and then for those positive skills to be shared. Well done, and please keep it up. I also want to share with you who are involved in media the fact that you can get anywhere you want to get in this profession if you have the right attitude, good aptitude, you take the opportunities when they come, you are dedicated and you are committed. I say that because just after I passed common entrance, my parents thought that the next challenge was for me to know what I wanted to do with my life. At 11 years old, I was wondering why it was so important to know what to do with my life. When I had checked my parents' age, I had a whole lifetime to get to where they were as adults. But they thought it was important for me to be focused and to know what I want to do with my life. And I thought about it only for a few minutes and said I wanted to work on the radio. And not just any radio, but at RJR. When I was 11. And so I went through high school, and I never thought of being anything else. And I remember in fifth form in high school, I had a principal who lived in Kingston but came to St. Mary to school every Monday morning, and he went home on Fridays. And Mr. Cargill, when I became head boy, wanted to know, well, what do you want to do? And I said I wanted to work in media at RJR. And he allowed me then, because in those days, it was $3.60 in 10-cent coins for you to make a call for 3 minutes from St. Mary to Kingston. And I told him I wanted to speak to somebody at RJR to understand how I can get into this thing. And so my principal said, well, 3 minutes might not work. So he allowed me to come down to the cottage. His son Keith was in my class, and he allowed me to make the call. And so I called RJR, and it's one of the experiences that I take through my life, because it was one of those things that could have caused me to change my mind. I called RJR, and I think I must have called at the wrong time, because the person who answered the phone in the newsroom, I put on my best St. Mary English, and I explained to them that I was calling from Highgate, and my name is Gary Allen, and I have an interest in being a journalist, and I wanted to work on RJR. And I'm calling to find out, how do I get involved in media when I leave high school? And the person on the other end of the phone said, it's almost news time, we're busy. Hang up the phone. That was my call. I could have been crushed. I could have walked away. I cried, but I dried those tears and I decided, okay, I'm going to do it. And I'm saying that to tell everyone who has a dream that if it is your dream, you might have some disappointment along the way, but do not give up on your dream. It is your dream, and if it is a dream to work in media and to do well, pursue it no matter what. I knew the person who I called. I knew the name of the person. It was one of my favorite persons, still a good friend of mine, and I've never told that person that I spoke to him and he hung up the phone on me. But I then left high school, where I wrote for the school newspaper, and my same principal introduced me to Franklin McKnight and told Franklin McKnight, oh, this is our little star writer. He writes for the school newsletter. So when I left high school, Franklin McKnight called up and said, do you want to try to write something from Highgate for the Gleaner? Then he was rural news editor. So I started to write for the Gleaner as a correspondent right out of high school. And my first article was published on the 5th of October 1985. It was about Shining Star Netball Club that was formed in Cairn Hall, St. Mary. And the Gleaner paid me $14.30 for the article. It measured 6 inches, and they would pay you by the column inch. So they measured how much it was in the paper, and they paid me that amount. My father said to me, if you stay home, I will give you that, and you don't have to go and work. But I wanted to work at RJR, and the Gleaner was where I started. And after 2 years of freelancing for RJR, one day the RJR correspondent did not come to a parish council meeting when the councillors walked out and were in the streets. And the police then said, you have to clear the streets. This man, Noel Walker, said he's not coming out of the streets. So they pushed him in the car, said they were arresting him. And I was looking around saying, where is Harold? This is a big story for RJR. Harold wasn't there. So I wrote my Gleaner story, sent it in, and then I called RJR. Call, collect. Who in here remember the days of collect call? I know I'm not too lonely and not too old. So you have to call the operator, and when the operator comes on the line, you give the operator the number, and you tell them you're placing a collect call, and you have to give them your name, and the person on the other end have to recognize the name and then decide if they accept the call before the operator puts the call through. This lady right here, so I know exactly what I'm talking about, you know. And so I placed this call. And who answered the phone but the news editor, Janet Mott. And I heard her talking to the operator. She said, I don't know anybody named Gary Allen. What is he calling about? The operator said, he just said Gary Allen and placing a collect call to RJR. She says, put him through. So I got to Janet Mott. Now, if you have met Janet Mott, small lady, but boy, she tougher than that column right there. And she said, who are you? I said, I'm the Gleaner's correspondent, and I'm used to seeing Harold Bailey report for RJR. He's not here today, and I think you're missing a big story. She says, what is it? And I told her what was happening. She says, and you're the Gleaner's correspondent? I said, yes. So she says, well, do you have a story written? I said, I do. So she says, give me the story. So I gave her the story, and she typed up the story, and I went home that evening and listened to my story in the 6 o'clock news on RJR. And this is after I decided at 11 that I wanted to work for RJR. So I'm saying to our young broadcasters, if you want to achieve your dreams, pursue them and take the opportunities as they come. Harold not being well that day was an opportunity for Gary. Gary took the opportunity. Janet took the call. And Janet and I now go to the same church. I see her on Sundays at church, and every now and then we talk about this. But she was also the one who had to give me clearance to go on air to present. And I remember the Sunday afternoon when I was going on air for the first time. It's not like these days when you come in and come from, some of them from Carmack, some of them from NCU, and they come in on Monday, and Tuesday they are on the air. Not those days. I spent almost 6 months in RJR learning to splice tape and write stories and all of that. And one Sunday afternoon, David Geddes didn't show up to read the 8 p.m. news. And I called Miss Mott at home and I said, we have a problem. David isn't here. It is 5 minutes to 8 and the news has to be read. And she says, okay, read it over, let me listen. So I had to start reading the news on the phone to her to decide whether I was going to present. Well, at about 7:45, she says, well, you need to be in the studio. Go and make yourself comfortable. Read the news. Don't massacre it. So that was another opportunity. Took the opportunity. I never feel my hands so wet. I sat down on the chair. I thought it was warm. By the time I get up, it was cold. And I got through that 5 minutes, which felt like 5 hours. And I went back upstairs and I sat down for about 5 minutes looking at the phone, waiting for it to ring. Because if the phone rang, I knew something was wrong. The phone didn't ring the night. The next morning, Janet came in, morning, and she walked past and went into her office. That afternoon, I asked if I could read the 3 o'clock news. And she looked at me. She said, what? I said, can I read the 3 o'clock news since I read the 8 o'clock news? She said, don't get carried away. Take your opportunities, be diligent, work hard, and be patient for the right moment. So that was my formative years. Now I went through the newsroom and I was a reporter, became assistant news editor, moved on and did other things and so on. The long and short of the story, ladies and gentlemen, and especially the children, is that coming through that process, and there are many other stories, many times with many things. There were instances when I remember one where I was introduced to violence downtown. And I remember it was an Isuzu trooper. And when there were gunshots firing, I thought the safest place I could find was right under the trooper, right by the wheel, until the tire blew out. My clothes was wet, and when I looked, there was no puddle on the street. So I took a taxi and went home to Havendale, showered and changed, and went back to work. Take your opportunities, learn from them, and make a better person of yourself in your profession. So I say all of that to say that that is a part of the road one travels. Because RJR then allowed me to start doing overseas assignments, and then I moved on to work elsewhere, lived elsewhere for a while, came back, and when you work somewhere, another point in the journey, when you work somewhere and you leave that place, leave it in a manner that if you have to come back to that place, nobody says, who that? So when I went away for almost 10 years, and it was time for me to come back to Jamaica, the day after I handed in my resignation in Barbados, I had a call which said that there was a FedEx package that I should expect. And the FedEx package that I got was an offer to come back to work at RJR. And so from the correspondent, then to the reporter in the newsroom, then leaving RJR, I came back to RJR as Director of Operations. And God has been good to me. I've been diligent, I've been fortunate, I've gotten opportunities, I've taken them even when they are wet. And I have made sure that when I walk away, I do not burn my bridges. So I have been able to move from being a correspondent in RJR to now being the managing director of the group. Anyone can do it. Thank you. I am not any more special than anyone, but if you give of your best, if you try hard, if you use your opportunities, you will also achieve your dreams. And the other day, I went down to the Gleaner, and someone said, you remember that is the Gleaner you really start. So I now think about it, and it is coming full circle. And God has been good. I have been fortunate. I commend to you the principles that carry me through. Be honest about what you're doing. Be committed to what you're doing. Be engaging in what you're doing. I notice how our children on KiDz HuB Media Network operate. They ask some very simple but piercing questions. Honest questions of their guests. You know, we have some big-time journalists. When they ask their questions, it's loaded with all of their personal interests. Everything that they think about and their point of view, it comes out in the preamble to a very long question. I listen to the children on Sunday afternoon and I hear them ask pointed questions, and that's refreshing. So keep it up. Be fair. Be fair when you ask your questions. Again, I listen and I hear the children ask questions on the one hand and on the other hand. They are being fair. Keep that up. I encourage you to always strive for excellence. I encourage you to be respectful, even though you can be assertive. Because you mustn't be a pushover, you know. If you are a pushover, then people will just move past you. Don't allow that. I used to, I had a former prime minister of Jamaica for an interview once. And just before the interview started, one of the prime minister's aides came up to me and said, please don't ask about a certain matter that came up today. So I started the interview with the question about that. And the prime minister at the time got up and walked off the program. And I sat down for the next 58 minutes apologizing on his behalf. So the next day, the media and the people and so on who were talking about it weren't talking about me not having an interview. They were talking about him and how he walked away. So you can make a point without making noise. Some people feel like they have to be loud. And you hear how it pops in the microphone when you're too loud. Yes. Sometimes we get a lot of popping instead of information. So as young broadcasters, don't just follow those who make noise and pop in the microphone. Make sure that your content is something that is discerning and something that you are sure your audiences are looking for. So I encourage you to continue on the path of excellence. I encourage you to continue on the path of diligence. I encourage your parents to continue to give you the support and the exposure. We commit at RJR to continue to do what we can. And it is my absolute pleasure to have been here and to have shared with you. And may the efforts of KiDz HuB International continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. And just to reiterate what he has said, as junior broadcasters, we should learn to take opportunities, be very patient, and work hard. All right, can we give him a next round of applause, please?